On this episode of AvTalk, we discuss Southwest Airlines' very bad weekend, what started it, and how social media just made everything worse. Plus, Air India has a new owner. Hello and welcome to episode 133 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick here, as always, with
Jason Rabinowitz. Hello, Ian. How's it going?
Hello, Jason. It's going well. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm taking the next couple days off and going to look at some trees for a while, so that'll be nice.
I feel like there's more to it than just kind of looking. Are you going leaf peeping?
No, but I'm sure I'll see some leaves.
Oh, so this is not a leaf peeping trip. You're not going to actually look at it. There will just be trees where you are. There will be trees,
yes. I am retreating out of New York City for a couple days, and there will happen to be some trees around.
Well, that sounds good. I mean, I thought maybe there was something special about these particular trees. Maybe you were going to go, well, no, it's not spring, so you wouldn't be making maple syrup. I don't know what you would be doing with the trees.
Wait, I thought maple syrup was the fall. That's spring?
Well, you tap them in the spring.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And then the whole pumpkin thing, I guess, is the...
Sure, a little too early in the year, at least this far south, to see any really, truly pretty trees, I guess, still, too.
Well, I wish you the best in your tree viewing.
Thank you.
It's turned into an odd arboreal podcast introduction, but here we are.
It was bound to happen eventually.
Eventually you end up in the woods. So let's talk about the elephant in the industry at the moment. It's Wednesday, the 13th of October, and over the past 5 or so days, Southwest Airlines has had a rough time, and they seem to now be getting back on their way with few cancellations finally today. Tuesday was better, but not great, and today they seem to be back to normal. But over the weekend, it was anything but.
Yeah, so we've seen this several times in the past, 6 months. We saw it with American, we saw it with Spirit, we saw it once before this summer with Southwest, actually, when they had some sort of IT issues that lasted several days and really handicapped the operation. But this one really seemed to be the most impactful and the most questionable, really, since Southwest really did not initially come clean to what the true issue was at hand. And they initially blamed this cascading, I'm going to call it a system failure, on weather and air traffic control problems in Florida. But weather and air traffic control problems in Florida on Friday shouldn't mean you're running only about 70% of your operation on Sunday. So the numbers just didn't add up, and it led to a lot of speculation, both valid and completely crazy, unacceptably damaging, wrong speculation.
Yeah, so let's back up to Friday. The precipitating factors that Southwest mentioned were all valid. That actually happened. So what happened is Southwest the impact on Southwest was oversized compared to other airlines based on their traffic into and out of Florida. There were thunderstorms in Florida. There was a staffing issue, a temporary staffing issue at the Jacksonville en route center in Florida. And the weather issues and the staffing issues were made worse by the fact that there was a military training exercise taking place off the eastern seaboard that closed some of the airspace to commercial traffic that would have been used for overflow to get around the weather that was impacting Florida. So flights coming up and down the eastern seaboard couldn't use certain airspace because of the military training exercises. And so you ended up with longer reroutes and ground stops and ground delay programs and all sorts of not fun stuff happening to all of the airlines that are trying to get in and out of Florida. The other airlines that were impacted by this, namely American and Spirit having the highest number of flights into and out of Florida specifically, their operations were not impacted beyond basically midday Saturday after all of this. Southwest, on the other hand, continued to have major problems throughout the weekend. And their stated rationale throughout the weekend was basically weather, and then they started just blaming the air traffic control problems, even though that was the beginning factor, but didn't really account for why Southwest was still having such trouble.
Yeah, I likened it to basically weather and air traffic control being the fuse that lit the dynamite that was packed with understaffing, overscheduling, fatigue by frontline staff, and then it just hit a point where the whole thing exploded and came undone. And this is pretty much exactly what we saw with Spirit a couple months ago, where they overreached, they overscheduled, their crews were overstressed, and it got to the point where flights ended up getting canceled, crews were displaced, aircraft were displaced, and they just couldn't keep track of where the planes were compared to where the crews were. And they couldn't make that link between getting the crews to the aircraft to operate the flights, which is what Southwest is basically saying. And then it took them days to really put all those pieces back together. Now, Southwest seems to have put the pieces back together and gotten a somewhat respectable operation faster than Spirit did a few months ago. But comparing Southwest to Spirit is not something you would have thought you'd have to do just a few years ago.
Well, especially given the fact that Spirit's business model is based on everything has to go right, or at least
the old Norwegian model.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And we've talked about this, how I think you personally have been impacted by that. And so, the Spirit's model being based on everything has to go right. Southwest, normally there's a bit more slack in the system, but now Southwest's system was stressed beyond breaking. And we saw what happens this weekend when you don't have the crews you need, where you need them, and when you need them, because a lot of this was bumping up against, okay, so now we have planes out of position, crews out of position, but we also don't have any legally allowable hours for crews to fly those planes back to where we need them to be.
Right. And this is something Southwest unions have actually been barking about quite loudly and quite correctly, it seems, over the past couple of months, that they have been overscheduled and overworked and overstressed, and the operation is going to come crumbling apart. And lo and behold, this past weekend, they were completely correct.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose we should touch on why this became a story, I think, outside of the aviation bubble, if we want to call it. And you touched on this kind of in the introduction to what we were talking about, is there was a lot of speculation by, I don't even call it speculation. It was just kind of unfounded rumor mongering.
It wasn't even rumor mongering. It was completely false and incorrect information being touted as absolute indisputable fact.
Yeah, I mean, the first places I saw it was, well, a source inside, a source I have inside Southwest. Oh, you have a source inside Southwest, Mr. at XYZ127654 with 4 followers and a Twitter account created 8 minutes ago? Interesting.
Yeah, weird. It turns out the ramper at Chicago Midway, who doesn't actually know anything outside of their own operation, probably isn't the best source for what's going on at the FAA Center in Jacksonville.
Yeah. So what's really funny to me, not funny in a ha-ha way, but funny in a, oh, that's how conspiracy theories work sort of way. The whole thing, the first bit of disinfo began with the controllers are revolting against being required to be vaccinated against COVID. And then when that got shot down by the controllers union, the FAA, and pretty much anyone who would know whether or not that was correct, it moved on to, oh, well, it's the Southwest pilots who are revolting and there's a work action. And the Southwest pilots were like, no, we're just being overworked. This has nothing to do with vaccines at all. This has everything to do with the fact that, say we need 1,000 pilots, we've got not 1,000 pilots. Or if we need, 2,000 flight attendants, we don't have 2,000 flight attendants. They're not scheduling enough people. We don't have enough people. And it just kind of jumped until ran out of steam. And then everyone was like, oh, well, okay, it was operational issues. And I don't think it was helped by the fact that Southwest over the weekend continued to say that it was air traffic control and weather issues.
Southwest, in the week following, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, up until this point, has been very vocal since then that none of those rumors were true. It was a staffing issue triggered by the bad weather and ATC issues in Florida. And an interesting stat from Gary Kelly that actually half of all Southwest aircraft touch Florida at least once a day, which is very interesting. And I did not know that. I don't know about you. So Southwest does have a huge oversized presence in Florida, but it took them far too long to really explain that, no, these rumors are categorically false, to the point where on Sunday, a day you normally wouldn't see much happening from a bureaucracy like the FAA, but they took to social media to explicitly refute the rumors that were happening, not quite mentioning Southwest directly by name, but basically saying, hey, we had some issues on Friday, but all of our data is open to the public. Nothing happened on Saturday and Sunday. So any of these issues that are happening, they ain't our fault.
Some airlines continue
Some
to have
airlines
issues.
Are continuing to have issues. I wonder who that may be.
I have no idea who they were talking about.
That is as close as you'll ever see a federal regulator throwing a company under the bus in a non-regulatory hearing.
I mean, I don't think it was the FAA throwing Southwest under the bus. I think it was the FAA crawling out from under the bus and then trying to toss Southwest back under. Because Southwest, I mean, had basically been relying on this, it's the air traffic control and weather's fault. And I know that when, people look at the weather and say, well, it's not raining here, we can take off. This is different because yes, there were weather issues, but then the damage had already been done. And instead of saying we're doing the best we can, we've got, some operational challenges or however you want to word that, and we're doing the best we can to get everyone on their way as soon as possible. You have, the airline continuing to say, well, it's the air traffic controller's fault. It's the air traffic controller's fault. It's the air traffic controller's fault. And I think the FAA rightfully said, and this happens sometimes, I think, during storms and things like that, where the FAA goes, the FAA does not cancel flights. Airlines cancel flights. That's always their line that they use anytime there's weather or anything like that, and people complain. But I think that's important to remember here is that the FAA is they're not out there saying, well, you can't run these flights.
They're just saying you got to run them 8 hours from now.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how this shakes out as far as what communication comes from airlines in the future, and what communication is this the start of better communication from the FAA? Because this seems like a very different tone from the FAA than we've seen in the past.
Yeah, in the past, it's typically been, here's the information, here are the delays, here's what's happening, get to the airport accordingly. This was very much, hey, this isn't our fault. There were issues, they're resolved. You should probably look to the airline as it's probably their fault right now.
Yeah, I don't see this as the beginning of an adversarial relationship. At least I certainly hope it's not, because I don't think that would serve anyone's interest, least of all the people who need to rely on both the FAA and airlines to get them where they need to go. But I thought it was good that the FAA kind of stood up for the air traffic controllers. And it wasn't just kind of the air traffic controllers union sticking up for the controllers, but it was the FAA itself. Let's stick with a similar topic that interestingly comes at a right time. The U.S. Department of Transportation Inspector General is beginning an investigation or study that will seek to ensure that there is adequate staffing in critical air traffic control facilities. You would think that this would already be well taken care of. The air traffic control critical facilities being a critical part of, the United States' national infrastructure. But talking to air traffic controllers, especially, you would know that that is not the case. And a lot of air traffic controllers that are on social media over the past weekend basically said, yeah, staffing's a problem. It's been a problem for a long time. This is not a new thing. We've been saying this for years. So whether the IG report actually develops into some real change as far as perhaps hiring additional air traffic controllers or expanding these facilities somehow, it'll be good to see them acting in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, I love a good investigation to tell you what you already know. Yeah, it's not even a completely obvious problem. Everyone knows about it, but it's like you said, it's also been a thing for decades at this point. I mean, as long as I've been involved in the industry, there's been maybe not a shortage of controllers, but clearly not enough to the point where now I believe controllers are doing mandatory 6-day work weeks, which is not great for anyone. That shouldn't be a thing that anyone has to do. Hopefully the FAA doesn't just take this report and say, yeah, okay, thanks. Hopefully they hire some more people. This is a good job that people should want to do. It pays well. Hopefully something actually changes and there's more, I guess, more staffing at the FAA controller wise. So things like what we saw in Florida don't happen again.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, it hopefully turns into real action on behalf of the FAA. But I guess we'll wait for the audit to come out and see where that goes. Let us now go halfway across the world, all the way to India, because there is now a new owner, well, old owner, but new again, of Air India.
No, someone bought Air India?
Someone bought Air India.
Was it you?
It was not me. My bid was far too low. As it turns out, a radio flyer wagon and a pack of chewing gum did not get the job done.
You needed 2 chewing gum packs.
Next time. We'll see what happens. The Tata Group has won its bid for Air India, and they are set to take over the airline, looking to close the deal by the end of the year. And it'll be interesting to see what they do. So Air India is basically an international airline as far as what slots they have and where they fly competitively, should we say. So that'll be interesting to see how they develop their competitive market within India. So Tata already owns it's 51%. Sorry, I was getting my numbers mixed up and I knew that wasn't right. 51% of Vistara, which is their joint venture with Singapore Airlines, and they own 84% of AirAsia India. So they've basically adding another airline to their already pretty hefty portfolio. But this opens up a lot of international flying that they can do, especially with the fleet that Air India has with the 777s, the 787, and they still have one 747 hanging around.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
There was some information, some very interesting information posted to Twitter from the Indian aviation sphere, which is quite active, obviously, in the wake of this deal. But there's a lot of baggage that's coming along with Air India and really highlights the managerial malfeasance and deferred maintenance that Air India had been perpetuating for probably a decade or more. But Tata is going to have to refinance all of its debt, its aircraft titles, its contracts with lessors, suppliers, vendors, everyone. This report, I think it's from Business Standard, says that the maintenance contracts on its fairly new, still 787s are lopsided, that they're paying way higher than average figures for maintenance on those 787s. At least 5 of them are actually grounded due to engine or other part shortages. Most of the 787 fleet is due for very expensive and time-consuming landing gear overhauls in 2 years. 2 of the 777s are found not to be fit to fly at all. The remaining, if you know anything about Air India, need to be completely refurbished top to bottom because they are, let's call it, not competitive in any way. So they have a lot of work to do to get Air India from not even up to a respectable airline, but a functional airline with a fleet that actually is capable of mostly flying. It's going to take a long time and a lot of money to get that happen, right.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think one of the other problems is that they have to keep everybody around for at least a year. And then they have to not fire people, but try to politely ask them to go by giving them money. And I think that's, a major challenge as well is the labor issues. You've got a lot of people who you might not need, especially if you have another full service airline and another low cost carrier. And are you looking to merge these two? Is there going to be, it does
No,
Vistara...
they said explicitly no. They will not be commingling Air India and Vistara because one brand is premium and is commingled with Singapore. The other is Air India.
Sure, but if you rehab the Air India brand, doesn't it eventually make sense to merge them?
If I were Singapore, I wouldn't want the stink of Air India anywhere near me.
Fair enough. The whole thing doesn't make any sense. Why anyone would want it is still beyond me. What Tata does with it, I think, is going to be a very interesting thing to watch, because if they can rehab Air India, if they can be successful, that is, it's a huge market. And so if they can play it right, if they can get their fleet in order, if they can do what a governmentally run Air India couldn't do, I think that'll be a fascinating success story. And I wish them all the best.
Yeah, good luck. I'm sure they know what they're getting into, but good luck with that.
But good luck. Also wishing good luck to Banza.
Who?
I know, that's what I heard.
Please explain what that is.
I cannot explain yet. And I will start by mentioning that our Australian colleague, Galen, who has appeared on the podcast in the form of correctly pronouncing Australian words that we could not the first time around. His initial comment was, I can't tell if this is a brilliant idea or a terrible one. We'll have to wait and see. So what the idea is a low-cost carrier for the Australian market. Banza is looking to launch by not beginning of next year, but early next year. And they're going to be an ultra low-cost carrier model for secondary cities and less served regional cities in Australia. So they're kind of looking for like a EasyJet, Ryanair-ish model, and then focus on leisure destinations. So I guess it's like a TUI plus Ryanair plus EasyJet model. But in any case, they're going to forego all of the stuff that you would normally get with an airline, and they give you a chair to sit in and a plane to ride in, and then you're on your way. So with point-to-point service. Yeah. So, that's it'll be interesting to see what happens. Their plan is to use 737 MAX 8s. And so that'll be an interesting way to go. And you'll see them around at the beginning of next year. And if anyone flies them, please let us know what they are like. This should be an interesting one.
I think they had mentioned, or maybe I'm incorrect here, but I think they mentioned that they're like the first real new low-cost carrier in Australia to fly 737s, but that also discounts Rex, which actually I don't think is flying the 737 right now because of lockdown issues in Australia. But it's an interesting time down under for new and expanded low-cost carriers, giving something Australia really hasn't had in the past.
Yeah, and this would be an unowned by a larger company. And so that would be one of kind of the first things that they're touting. They're not Qantas owned, they're not Virgin owned, they would be their own owned. So that'll be an interesting thing to see how well they do there. And then we've got Fiji ready to put the MAX back into service in December. That'll touch on Australia because that'll be one of the destinations that Fiji Airways is going to be flying with their MAXs. So they announced that this week, and that adds to the nearly complete but still very conspicuous absence of certain regions that have yet to approve the 737 MAX. So we'll see how that goes.
Who's left other than obviously China, who you're alluding to there? There's China and Russia. Who else is out there that has not reapproved the MAX yet?
That's a really good question.
I know there's one down in Africa. What is it? Like Air Mauritania had one. Who knows what they're doing?
I think they're back in service.
Are they?
I think so.
Oh, good for them.
I will double check. I think they're back in service. That's an interesting list that I'm going to have to pull and see who's still not flying the MAX. We'll have to talk about that next episode. But for right now, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about a job that neither Jason nor I are qualified for, but sounds really great. And we'll talk about how we're not moving to Texas. But if you are moving to Texas and you have a bunch of money, you might want to check this house out. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. And there is a job opening that neither Jason nor I are qualified for.
Not even close.
But it's a really cool job. And if you happen to be listening to this podcast and you are qualified, you should really apply. Jason, tell them what they want.
Yeah, so we talked to Sean Payne a few months ago about what he does at the NTSB in regards to listening to not just aircraft flight and voice data recorders, but also from other vehicles, I guess, boats and helicopters and cars and trucks. And they are hiring in that division. The official name of the title is Interdisciplinary Engineer / Computer Scientist bracket Vehicle Recorder Specialist close bracket. So it's a very nice title. It is a full-time position down in Washington, D.C. Sorry, no remote work is possible for this since you'll be, I'd imagine working with actual recorders. If you want to work with Sean, and it sounds like it could be a very interesting job, I won't get into it, but some of the details are providing engineering advice on vehicle recorders and one or more modes of transportation, performing vehicle recorder investigations as a group chairperson in a technically competent and thorough manner with supervision and mentoring from more senior NTSB staff. So basically, you will be in the department that, as I understand it, handles the vehicle recorders post accident, crash, incident, whatever. And if you are into it and you have the requisite background, education, and prior work history, this could be a very interesting position, but you have to apply by November 9th, and you have to apply correctly, because if you do not provide it in the format expected, usajobs.gov will promptly disregard your information.
How dare it?
How dare someone not file the proper formatting is more like it.
Well, there's that. We will put a link in the show notes to the job description and the application. Hopefully, someone out there is going, yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I would like to do that. And you enjoy a wonderful career as a vehicle recording specialist.
Yes, that could be a lot of fun and probably a lot of work. Good, rewarding work.
Yeah, good, rewarding work. So I was vaccinated in a store for COVID. I went to a store. I stood in line for a little bit, and that was that. Jason, I assume you probably got the same thing. But
I went to a building.
There you go. Yeah,
down the street, a medical building. It was great.
Look at that.
Yeah.
But there are some folks in New Zealand this weekend that are going to have a much better, as far as I'm concerned, backdrop for their vaccination.
Man, all these people who waited are getting all the good stuff.
I mean, really. Some people got paid. Other people get to go sit on a 787. So Air New Zealand has a special vaccination clinic happening this coming weekend that will take place aboard one of its 787s. And I thought that was a really cool thing to do, and especially to kind of encourage people to go and get vaccinated. I thought that was a really good idea, and I won't be taking advantage of it, mostly because I've already been vaccinated.
You won't be taking advantage of the New Zealand vaccination program.
I have not invented a teleportation device yet. I'm still working on it. I'm missing a few parts, but that is something that if you are in New Zealand, you should check that out.
Yeah, this is a step just above what Delta was doing, where they had their mass vaccination center in the Delta Flight Museum, basically right underneath the 767, which is awesome. This is a step above since you actually get to go on the airplane. People will board through the door into business premiere. You'll receive your 1 dose of the Pfizer vaccine in the arm of your choice, which is nice.
Well, at least they give you a choice.
Do you want it in the right or the left? It's your choice. Then you will move into the economy cabin, where a snack service will commence while you wait to disembark the aircraft after your observation period. So not only are you getting your vaccination, but you're getting a free snack.
Wow. How about that?
I want to know what that snack is. Does Air New Zealand have like a signature snack, like Delta has its Biscoff and United has its stroopwafel?
I don't know. The next time I can fly Air New Zealand, I will, just to find that out.
Great.
All right. So we've got into the middle of October. We now have order and delivery numbers from the major manufacturers. Unhelpfully, I guess, they break them out differently. And Jason decided that the math just wasn't good enough to do. So we're going to do Boeing's third quarter deliveries and Airbus's monthly deliveries. Jason, take it away.
Yeah, math isn't my strong suit, and I just don't have the time to break it out right now because we only decided we're going to do this during the break. But in the third quarter 2021, Boeing delivered 85 aircraft, mostly 73 MAX, if we're being honest, which would be 66 MAX, bringing it to 179 total for the year, 2 747. I don't know who those went to, but I'm assuming they're cargo. All UPS at this point, yeah. 11 767s, which maybe also UPS. FedEx. And 6 777s, which I'm just going to assume is cargo at this point, right?
Yes.
And the last 300 ER to somebody? I don't remember who.
Is it Aeroflot?
Aeroflot, yeah, that sounds right. Aeroflot, I think that was it. And still, up until this point that this data was released, next to the third quarter 787 deliveries is a dash, meaning none. They did not successfully deliver any 787s in the third quarter, so their year-to-date total remains at 14. Great, but that may be changing soon. We'll see in the next couple of weeks. Meanwhile, on the Airbus side, we only have the numbers for September 2021. I could put the numbers together for all of the third quarter, but I don't want to. So here's September: 4 A220-300s, 20 A320neos, 1 A321ceo, which went to Delta. So they're actually still delivering some ceo aircraft. 9 A321neos, 1 A330-200, which I assume is an MRTT to some government, 3 A330-900neos, 1 including to Air Belgium, which I think is their first, and 2 A350-900. Shockingly, there were no A380s delivered.
Yes, shockingly.
Shocking. But a good, healthy spread of aircraft from Airbus. I'm a little surprised there were no A350-1000s in that list.
There's a couple that are getting ready to go home that we saw in Toulouse that looked like they were finishing up their pre-delivery testing. So I would assume that they'll be part of the October monthly tally when we get that next month.
Yeah, there you have it. The A320neo is really still delivering quite strongly. I was surprised actually that the 320 had more than double the amount of deliveries than the 321neo, which I thought was a more popular aircraft at this point, but I guess not.
I think as far as orders go, I mean, that's certainly the case.
But deliveries,
I think we haven't caught up with the deliveries yet. Yeah, you'll start to see that in a few years. Let's close the show with a little real estate news. So Jason apparently has a few million laying around. I wish you would have told me sooner. We could have done something with that, Jason. But you have started real house hunting in Austin, Texas for some reason, and came across a rather interesting home.
So it's brought to my attention that there is a house in the northwestern suburbs of Austin, Texas, currently listed for $4.25 million, recently reduced by $250,000 actually, that has a theater room that is completely designed in aircraft interior specifications, basically. It has the sidewall of, I'm not sure what aircraft that is. It looks like it might be a 737. I'm not quite sure. And the seats pulled out from the first class seats from a Delta L1011. It's got 3 rows of seats and a nice projector. And I can't afford a $4.25 million house, nor can you, I imagine. But if you are looking for a house in Austin, Texas, and have a couple million to drop, and you like airplanes, this looks like a pretty good choice.
I mean, you really can't go wrong with an airplane themed movie room, but can you only show airplane movies?
Oh, of course.
You have to, this movie has been modified and formatted to fit your screen.
Yeah, it's only going to be presented in like fuzzy SD, and you're going to have to watch a few commercials from Delta before you actually watch the movie, but it'll be worth it.
Or like a few years ago, the American all those NBC shows that had the goofy commercials.
The worst. The worst. You're only allowed to watch season 5, episode 9 of that stupid show in the Walmart knockoff.
Well, if you've got, a little over 4 million just laying around, go for it. And then
put it on Airbnb
for a movie.
Put it on Airbnb so we can go for a night.
There you go. Problem solved. This has been episode 133 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Thanks for listening.